Welcome to Shop Talk Live, episode number 306.
No.
Yeah?
No, Phil. No.
No?
Well, okay. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but it's still our show.
Well, then I really read that email wrong then. This is embarrassing.
I know your TV's Phil Huber. I know you have a podcast, but this is still my ship.
All right.
And I'm running it as long as Mike lets me.
Keep me out of this conversation.
So, So, Mike, do you want to? Should we? There's a lot of the audience that knows what's going on, I'm sure. But do we want to talk about our why Phil is here with us and why we don't dislike him anymore?
We are now part of a happy, larger, blended family, I guess. Fine Woodworking, along with the other products produced by Taunton Press, are now under the umbrella of AIM, Active Interest Media. Is that it? Everyone's got different.
Yeah. No, Active Interest Media. Yep.
Right on. So Phil, who's the editor of Woodsmith, along with Logan Whitmere, who's the editor of Pop Wood. We are all now playing in the same corral in terms of woodworking magazines. So I think it's pretty exciting. We've just found out about the awesome video studio Phil has access to, and
we have access to.
We are making plans to invade that when they're not looking. But just Phil, I've known you just, a little bit over the years, being on the podcast and seeing you at a show here and there. And it's just great to actually, we're starting this podcast about a half an hour late because we spent the first half an hour just talking about what's going on. So, it's scary. We all want to make sure that we're still going to produce the same product. I know our readers and members are worried, like, oh no, what's going to happen is Fine Woodworking. Are they going to turn into a crappy magazine? What's going on? And the answer is, man, we're still at the helm. We're still busting our butts to create the content in the magazine and the membership videos and all that good kind of stuff to the best of our abilities. And my hope is that not only are we not going to kind of fall off the wagon in terms of the quality of content, hopefully we're going to be able to pool resources and make things bigger and better.
Yeah. One of the things that I think in publishing, especially when you have magazines like this, there's this idea that we all hate each other, or there's this competition, or like hidden corporate espionage or stuff like that. And that's not really how I've ever really wanted to operate. I've always had a long admiration and subscription to Fine Woodworking, and I look forward. I listen to your guys' podcast all the time when I'm walking my dog, and
you text me haikus about the podcast.
I text Ben haikus periodically.
Proof that there is no like in or outfighting or whatever, infighting, but corporate espionage going on. Which, for the record, I used to when I started. She won't listen to this, but when I started, I was afraid to put things on a Google Calendar, because I was afraid that Megan Fitzpatrick would find my Google Calendar and know what I was going to do next week on the website. And like it took me a long time to realize it was like, oh no, wait a minute. We all talk and we're all friends and all of this stuff. But yes, for years now, Phil has been messaging me, texting me haikus. I don't know when that started.
You guys had there was an episode on your podcast where it was you and Anissa. Was Mike on that one?
Probably then, yeah.
Where I think it was Christian Bexford had sent a haiku in about something.
Right. That's right.
And then you had done like a call for other woodworking haiku. And recently my daughter and I and my mom now have been trading haiku back and forth. I found a book at a used book sale about haiku and translating it to English and stuff. So I've for some reason that form of expression has kind of burrowed in deep on me. This is where Ben does
backwards now.
This is where Ben does his. This is a woodworking podcast voice. Yeah.
No, screw that. What? So yeah, we've really been texting a lot, Phil.
So while Ben looks, part of what I've really excited about is being able to have a set of colleagues who come from a different group perspective, in the sense that, I've been at Woodsmith for 21 years now, and we kind of do things our way. It's just kind of evolved that way. And to be able to look at and be able to feel like I can, without fear, ask you guys how you run your ship, for looking for ideas to make it better. Not that you wouldn't have answered before, but we all answer to people, and I just didn't want it to be weird. Yeah. That you had to be like, why are you talking to Phil from Woodsmith? Like, that kind of thing. So that's what I'm excited about. You guys have a different perspective on stuff, and I can't wait, honestly, to have that, to be able to ask you, like, for example, Shop Notes. We brought Shop Notes back as a digital publication. There's been a lot of demand for it from customers. And right now, it's been revived in a way that looks very similar to what it used to, on purpose. But I would love for, like, Mike and John over there to just, like, look at it and be, if we're going to be a digital title, like, what does that need to look like? We have a vocabulary that it's like our woodworking projects. We've developed our own voice and style and vocabulary. And what I need is a little outside, like, hey, have you thought about, or what if we, or, whatever I think is going to make this better.
Yeah, I'd be really interested in seeing what you're coming up with, because we've never done a digital only, magazine. Like, what is that? What are the sensibilities? Because, in print, we think in terms of spreads. I love delivering content in that spread form. It's like such a really sort of elegant way to partition out information in really logical ways and lead you through the pages. And there's something special about a 2-page article or a 4-page. What is a 6-page? What is an 8-page? They all have these different personalities. And so when it goes digital, do you have a spread? Is it just that running toilet paper of content?
All of a sudden there's odd numbers.
Yeah.
So, like 5.
And we've always done that, in Woodsmith and Shop Notes. It was, our style was everything that was talked about or shown in art and photos on that spread got talked about on that spread. Mm-hmm. So that when you turned a page, it wasn't like, refer to the drawing 2 pages ago, and then you're flipping back and forth. Right. So you're right. It's a 2-page spread is a very immersive experience.
Yeah.
In that it's got this wide kind of wraparound feel to it. And when you go to a digital publication, it's all about single pages, and it's tough to, you spend a lot of space in writing, navigating people, to get them where they need to be looking.
Right. And then also you've got other resources at hand. In print, you've got, text, photos, illustrations, captions. That's about it. And then all of a sudden you go digital. Now I've got video. Now I've got click here for full-size plan, or click here for an article on cutting rabbits with the dado blade. So we don't have to cover it right now. So all of a sudden it becomes that 3-dimensional chess where the resources have expanded, but then that game of organizing all those and utilizing all those effectively becomes a whole different animal. So why did you decide to keep it a digital only product?
We're getting too deep in the weeds, folks.
No, it's not deep in the weeds. People ask that question to me all the time. The main reason is when we were trying to relaunch this was late. We were talking about it all last year, 2022, in the lead up for it. And then probably, I think, starting in July of 2022, there was the post office announced that they were going to do 2 or 3 rate hikes, like November, January, and March, or something like that. Yeah. And then there was a paper strike in Finland that was like 20% of the world's paper supply. So paper prices were just skyrocketing, and then we're thinking about trying to launch a title in that. And then, the world was still sort of coming out of COVID. So honestly, there wasn't a lot of capacity in print shops around the country. So that if we wanted to, scheduling was going to be a little bit of a nightmare to try and figure that all out. So, and then it was, we've gotten a lot of questions about bringing shop notes back, but is that enough to invest what you need to invest?
Sure.
Paper and ink and time and, processing capacity, because when you're going from digital, you're treating your photos and your drawings in a totally different way than you are if you're going to print.
Right.
Yeah. So that was the reasoning primarily back then.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
We're also in a much more digital world than when Shop Notes was last around. So does that, a lot of people read stuff online now. How well does that translate? To your point that you made earlier, Mike, about being able to have these other resources. But part of it is that there's a little bit of a danger too, that if you click that article on rabbiting on the table saw, all of a sudden you're like 8 videos into YouTube and you're like, I don't even remember what I was doing. And I just watched a preview for a Marvel show now. Like, what has that got to do with a tool cabinet?
I just start closing windows on Chrome every now and then. I go, oh, that's what I was doing 3 hours ago. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I have your last haiku.
Okay.
And this message is from Phil. I listened to the Raleigh episode, so I wrote a haiku, naturally. This is really good, too. Thrust bearing spins up. Finger pressure pushes wood. Bandsaw Nirvana. Nice. Mike, you look confused. Okay.
I just needed a moment of silence to appreciate that. That's the ripples in the pond were still expanding.
Yeah.
Nicely done.
I think we should real quick just acknowledge two of the losses at Fine Woodworking. Unfortunately, in the merger, there's stuff happens, and unfortunately, Amanda's no longer with the magazine, and Katie, who was unknown to our audience, mostly probably because they worked behind the scenes and making my life infinitely easier as assistant digital editor. And they unfortunately were not able to make the transition with us. And that just stinks. But, Amanda's flying down to Florida right now to do an all women's woodworking event at Florida School of Woodwork. She's knee deep in it already. And I have nothing but the most respect and admiration for both of them, and look forward to, following along with their exploits to come.
Absolutely. Yeah. Losing Katie and Amanda was definitely, the lowest point of this transition. Tremendous people, as we got really small staffs and we're all closer to family than we are colleagues. And, to lose either one of them. And they're both, amazing people, but also super talented and really a part of our strategy moving forward. So, my hope is that even while they're not on the staff right now, certainly, any way that we can continue working with them. And of course, Amanda does not need us to be successful in her future, but she's just such a shining star in leading the way for the craft that any way we can still continue to have her involved with the magazine and the website. That fingers crossed. I'm going to make that happen.
Yeah. So, all right. Questions? Y'all ready?
Okay.
All right. Jake has a two-part question, or two totally separate questions, but I love them both. So, hey, love the show. I'm almost caught up after only discovering the podcast about 2 months ago. I have two questions. And maybe we'll do these one at a time. What do you clean your fine handcrafted furniture with? During the pandemic, I was cleaning with bleach like an idiot, but I was paranoid. Now I've turned to lemon polish. What do you use? So I think this leads me to ask Phil, you the question, because I know the answer for Mike. Mike's house has 5 pounds of furniture in a 3-pound box. So I know that Mike's house is filled with finely crafted furniture, and tea cabinets and all sorts of things. Phil, did you make the furniture in your house?
I've made quite a few things in our house. I'd have to go. I had a friend visit that I hadn't seen in 10 years or something, and he wanted to see the stuff that I've made. And I was kind of aghast by the time I got through the tour of the house of all the things that I had made, because it starts to blend into the background.
Yes.
So yeah, I've made quite a few things. I'm also a ridiculously sentimental person, in the sense that if a family member gives me something that belonged to some other family member, it's never leaving the house. So even if it ends up that I would have 2 sideboards because one is from my wife's side of the family and then I make one, it could be catastrophic. So we're in a very similar way where there's just a lot of stuff around the house, and a lot of it I've made and other stuff we've got handed down to us.
So how do you treat it? How are you cleaning?
Most of the time, if I'm just like cleaning, it's really just a damp soapy rag kind of thing. I think that's probably the most friendly way to clean furniture if it has any kind of a finish on it. There are some pieces that, and I'm not sure if I'd even qualify it as cleaning, probably, is I'll just hit it with a new coat of paste wax periodically. There's the solvent that's in the paste wax that's probably killing stuff along with portions of my brain cells or something like that.
So you're using paste wax as a disinfectant?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, the only thing that's getting
polish. It's a disinfectant.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's how I would clean stuff. If something new comes into our house, it's going to get a wipe down with kind of a damp, soapy cloth and then dried off, and then probably gets a coat of paste wax on it. I'm not really, that stuff that gets wiped down most of the time are, a wood kitchen countertop that I made, or kitchen table or dining room table, things like that. That's going to get heavy wipe downs, but rarely to never am I using something that's a disinfectant or something like that on it.
What about you, Mike?
I thought about it like a damp rag, if anything, is pretty much it. A lot of times if there's a little table that just gets a ton of use and then I'm going to take it, as part of a gallery, something, or, to a class or a show or something like that, then I look at it and realize, oh my gosh, I can't show this. So literally, so white rings are really easy because that's typically moisture reacting to a wax on a finish. And to that point, some 4-aught steel wool and paste wax that's the miracle cure for any white rings on a table. If they're black rings, it means that the moisture has gotten through the finish down to the wood. If it's just like a shellac finish on a small table and it's pretty beat up, I'll just scrape that thing down, get some oxalic acid on it, some deck brightener to get rid of any dark rings. That does a really good job. And, a couple coats of shellac and steel wool and paste wax, and it looks great. So rather than cleaning, I just like strip off the finish and just put a new finish on.
It's practice.
Yeah. And we have sort of a little, kitchen peninsula cherry countertop that we eat at every single day, maybe even a couple times a day. And that had like a wiping varnish finish, and that thing just got beat up over time. So I kind of scraped it down as best as I could. I took some remnants of a fast drying polyurethane floor finish that was left over from my shop, and I just like slathered that onto that top, and that thing is bomb-proof. That thing has lasted so long. So it really kind of got me rethinking, maybe my finish recommendations. But for the most part, dry cloth, if that doesn't do it, a damp cloth, if that doesn't do it, a little fingernail action where you need it. And then if you're got your kid with markers at the table, do your best and then just call it the patina of use. That's just a record of its stay on this planet. Call it good. Yeah.
I will say to Jake, John Coffey, we did a French polishing series with John Coffey, and his gig is finishing and refinishing, and he's, based in Long Island and has, standing appointments with homes to go in and touch up their furniture once every 6 months or whatever. His rule for his clients is nothing in a can, like a spray can. Never, ever allow anything in a spray can to touch the furniture he's working on. I think, and I remember telling my mom this because like on the weekends, that was like one of our chores was to like pledge everything in the dining room.
Yeah.
And, but it just builds up over and over and over and over. And, you wind up applying a lot more wax and solvents and whatever than you really should be with spray finishes. So, just that's his rule. I'll link to his, spiel. It's a fantastic video series, first off, but that is primarily mostly for shellacked furniture, I'm sure, but I think it's probably a good general rule in to start light, start with water or soapy water. And then, I keep a can of, lighter fluid naphtha, just rosinol or whatever it is, naphtha in my shop for that next level up of solvent. If you need to get something off, that's generally a good solvent for things like that. I'm not really a fan of lemon oil. It tends to make things maybe a little bit greasy. And I do have a caveat with the spray wax thing. And I've heard the same thing, and it's general advice. Don't use it, especially for refinishers, because it has silicone in it. Yeah.
And that's really hard to get off, and finishes won't like it. However, I had given my brother and his wife a small little table. Obviously, it was like last minute, a little stand for their microwave. And it was about 2 coats shy of a proper finish, and it was pretty dull. And I visited my brother maybe, a year or two later, and I saw that, and it had the best finish on it I've ever seen. And I thought, what happened? What do you do with this? Oh, I just use a spray wax now and then. So it's like, oh, okay. There's a reason they make that. So.
All right. So Jake's second question, I think this one's great for Phil because y'all, the wacky Woodsmith crew is just constantly making tools and all of this stuff. So I wanted to get your input on this. I was listening to a recent episode about block plane versus shoulder plane versus rabbet block planes. And I thought to myself, wouldn't a plane that was as wide as a rabbet block plane, but as tall as a large shoulder plane be great? So my question is, have you ever thought of a tool design that doesn't exist to your knowledge, but would be super helpful, if only for one job?
Oh my gosh, that's the whole reason Shop Notes exists. is to have, whether, if we can expand the definition of tool to, jigs and accessories for power tools and stuff like that, the stuff that we make is very involved sometimes. And that's on purpose, because if that's your thing, then you want it just right. Like Mike's box making sled has evolved in probably, 8 different configurations to where it is now, because every time he makes a box, he's interacting with that tool, that it's shaping how he works, but he's shaping how that box looks. So all the time there's tools that we've come up with that I have. And I think that's probably one of the best parts about being a woodworker is, with a small handful of hardware and some pieces of wood, you can create just about anything that you want in a functional custom setup. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We had it's been kicking around here for a long time, a Japanese plane that the body on it at the time was a little janky and whatever. And I thought, well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the blade out and make a new body in kind of the Krenov laminated style.
Okay.
Because it's a sweet blade, and it just needs, a plain body that can go along with it. So I tried it. And the problem is that after I tried it, is the blade is, 2.5 inches wide. And then by the time you make a Krenov style body for it, it was like this, you were hugging it or pushing it, it's like a two-handed, it just was this very clumsy tool that you didn't know would be that way until you tried it, know, and then, I tried it, and then that one went into the burn pile, and I learned a lesson on why Japanese plane bodies are shaped the way they are. So
turns out they know what they're doing.
Turns out, there is an embedded cultural knowledge there. Yeah. So to his question, I would feel the same way. Like, I would try it, like, give it a shot. Something that big. If you did it in a wood bodied style, which is entirely possible, give it a shot. I would have questions on its ungainliness. Mm-hmm. In that width, and then adding that kind of height to it. At that point, it would almost feel like, like you have a 4x4 that you're just trying to push down, but
which could be great. And we just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And it all depends on how you're using it. Are you, I've always advocated for a smaller shoulder plane than I think, like Mike has talked about in the past, but because when I'm using a shoulder plane, I'm refining 1/4 inch, maybe 3/8 inch wide table sawn or router cut details. So I don't need a large plane to do something like that. But if you're using your shoulder plane for tenons, or you're cutting those, you're doing a significant amount of work by hand, then a larger tool is very helpful. So
I'm with you, Phil, 100% in that. To me, one of the biggest joys in woodworking is that creative problem solving aspect to it. And a lot of times that means I've made some custom tools, whether it's a radius soled Krenov plane for working the inside of a Cooper panel. And, that was really cool. Or maybe a custom scratch stock or something. But for me, it's in jigs and fixtures to take a very simple tool like a router, or a very basic tool like a table saw, and make it do amazing things. I love that aspect of it. And you'd mentioned the evolution of my my box mitering sled for the table saw. A lot of that comes from the fact that I do a lot of teaching. So I come up with something that in the past, my philosophy was a jig should take 5 minutes to make, and you throw it away when you're done. And obviously, once you start teaching, it allowed me to kind of invest more time into it, and then you get something and you think it's perfect, and you take it to a class and there's 12 students of various skill levels, and that's like this awesome petri dish to see what, to really stress test this thing. And it's one of the things where if one person out of 12 has a problem, the rest is getting it, that's okay. But if like 3 or 4 people are kind of, you watch them, you don't say anything, you give them basic instruction, and by the time they get to it, they've of course forgotten what you've said, and you just look intuitively, what are they reaching for? What are they doing? What problems are they having? And then that just informs the next iteration of that. Okay, I can solve for that, until you get to the point where you're a few steps down the road to something that is hopefully pretty bomb-proof for students. But then by the time I get it working well for a student, I realize, oh, I like that. I use that. That works well for me too. So that's the kind of the phase I've been in for quite a while, is not just, coming up with a solution, but having the opportunity to put it to use, have other people use it, and rethink and rethink and rethink. And yeah, I love that. So it's like sometimes I complain, oh, I'm just prepping for classes, I'm not really making anything, but so much of the prepping for a class involves that same joy of invention as anything else does. But
yeah. All right. So this question is from Timothy, and this one, I promise I try and remember to put photos in the videos, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. And y'all, I'm doing what I can. From Timothy, I was going to build the pedestal table by Tim Rousseau featured in Fine Woodworking when my wife saw his inspiration piece in the intro by Alan Peters, and see photo below. I am now commissioned by her to build it. And then there's the oh no emojis. That's how I read it, at least. I have done a solid sawn mock-up just for shape, but I'm worried about grain orientation. What is the strongest way to create these legs? Bent lamination and veneer, steam, or solid sawn? And for the audio-only audience, it is basically a pedestal-ish table, 4 legs that meet in the middle. And those legs do make about a 170 degree turn. So there is all sorts of ways for you to wind up with short grain on these legs. And as we all know, short grain is the killer of table legs, probably. But so there's a bunch of different ways of doing this. Mike, when you look at this, what are you... First off, do you know how Alan Peters would have done it?
Alan Peters was a pretty tricky guy. He was like a consummate craftsman, English woodworker, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's, one of the late 20th century just brilliant woodworkers and mentors to many, many, many successful woodworkers. So he's a super smart guy. It could definitely be made in segments, but those curves, it just feels like bent laminations could get you those curves. And so now you have these curved elements, and then you're probably attaching them somehow to solid stock elements. So then it comes down to, how do you bend the curve? Cool. Now I have a curved piece. How do I slice it up in such a way that it can mate cleanly with other parts and pieces? There's a lot of fun stuff there. If it's solid, I think the thing is, the joinery issues. Is it something where today you would just use a domino, so you can butt joint everything super cleanly, use a domino, and then maybe cut your final curves after the fact? Are you...
So like block it up, like have it be linear flat surfaces blocked up to assemble the stock, and then cut that curve out? Okay. Yeah,
the same way you would do like a... what is the chair? Federal style chair where it's basically the sides are all kind of curvy parts, but it's just glued up from solid square stock.
Okay.
And then you cut the shapes afterwards. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple cool ways to do it, and I would like that challenge just because I'm not sure how I would do it. And in figuring it out, I'm going to add something to my skill set in terms of making something. That's like one of the best things about commissions in my early days is it was things I wouldn't necessarily want to make, but certainly learning how to make it was a huge fun. Phil, what are your thoughts on that?
It's always funny for me on stuff like that because it turns into like a choose your own adventure novel when you're looking at stuff like that. Because
Yes.
are you trying to make that piece, or are you trying to make a piece that evokes that look? Where it gets to the point where it's Tim Russo's version, and I built a version of a Tim Russo table in a smaller format. And when I looked at that as the question, I thought about it in terms of how I made that Tim Russo table, and I would break it up into that base into 3 sections where there's basically the foot cross piece, and then a short column where those C-shaped arms are meeting, and then the upper arms would come together and they would I would connect those with loose tenons. Like Mike said, where you'd be able to focus on cutting those mating joint faces tight, and then doing a separate step for the joinery, and then doing your final shaping after that.
Yeah.
So that's how I would look at it. The other thing that I thought of is if you're looking for that shape, because one of the downfalls of pedestal tables is, especially when they get long, is that's such a big moment arm when somebody leans on the table, to get up.
Yeah.
That thing just is just asking to snap. Is what if you did that C shape and you laminated it from like 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood, cut out your C shape and made 4 sets of those, and then veneer it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because then you could do like a really cool cross-banded veneer that kind of follows those faces, and, veneering the inside, those curves are tight, but they're not too tight for veneer, that it would be pretty straightforward to do. And you would have a sweet looking table, and maybe the base would be solid wood as it transitions into there, just so, because you're going to bump into it with the vacuum cleaner and brooms and feet scuffing and stuff like that. But the main C shape, I think you could do with big pieces of plywood with a really sweet veneer pattern on there.
Yeah. I think I'm looking, I looked up that table and I'm pretty sure it's the same piece, the photo. There are other photos. It's on a website by Jack Berberich, furniture maker in Cincinnati, Ohio. And he says this table is based on the photo on page 83 in Alan Peters' book, Cabinet Making. So there's a book that probably tells you how to do it, but other photos show this is definitely made from solid stock. That was, pieced together, and you could see where the seams are, and there's a little bit of short grain, but I think it's a super, super solid way to go about doing that.
Yeah.
I always like to, like you, Phil, I like to, like that choose your own adventure, but I like to try and figure out what my favorite woodworkers would do. Like, given this thing, like, I think Tom McLaughlin would maybe make the core, like you said, out of plywood and veneer it, because he does such. And we have a veneering e-learning. Marketing drop. We have a Tom McLaughlin veneering course. Head on over to finewoodworking.com/veneering. I'll put the link in there. But I think that the plywood core is a really cool idea, and you could do a lot of stuff. I think that somebody like Michael Fortune would do a bent lamination, possibly like a tapered bent lamination. Don't you think, Mike? It's, Tim Rousseau's kind of had his say. He made his design a little different,
Yeah.
But that's just such a fun thing for me, is to sit there and try and figure out, what would you so-and-so do with this? Like, what would Adrian Ferrazzuti do with it? And it would be like some wacky, like, genius thing with like Bondo templates and like all sorts of cool things. But if I were tasked with recreating this table, I think I would do the blocked up form, but maybe with bridle joints. I don't know. But yeah. All right, everybody good? Let's take a quick break.
All right.
Sutherland Wells believes that your exceptional craftsmanship deserves an exceptional finish. They handcraft their full line of low and VOC exempt finishes and stains with the highest quality, cold pressed, sustainably grown tung oil. Their polymerization process gives you the grain enhancing, wood nurturing, deep penetration, and non-yellowing protection of raw tung oil, but decreases drying time and allows the oil to both penetrate and build a film finish. Sutherland Wells traditional oil aesthetic for the contemporary woodworker. Use code FWW23 for 10% off your first order. New Concepts has released the newest in its line of innovative marquetry, a smaller, more affordable marquetry saw that makes precision sawing available to everyone. The new compact marquetry saw has an 8-inch throat and the same adjustable ball bearing guide tower as the much larger Lee Marshall Edition marquetry saw, so it can handle double bevel inlay with ease. The smaller size makes it perfect for those who are just starting out or who work on smaller items and don't need the reach of the larger marquetry saw. The compact marquetry saw uses New Concepts' dovetail mounting system, so it can be removed from the workbench and stored in seconds, reducing its shop footprint to almost nothing. See it at newconcepts.com. That's KNEWCONCEPTS.com. Real quick, I want to tell you about Fine Woodworking's e-learning course, Veneering with Tom McLaughlin. The course starts January 17th. 3 Q&A sessions with Tom, live, like interactive Q&A sessions. If you are interested in adding veneer to your woodworking repertoire, this is the best chance you have to do it. You'll have full access to someone who is a master of veneering. Finewoodworking.com/veneering course to get more information. Again, finewoodworking.com/veneering course. Course opens January 17th, and I think there's a big old discount right now. Phil, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. This was a game time decision on this one because I've had 2 of them poking around in my head recently. But the big one for me is all-time favorite tool this week is my router plane. Oh. And I've been working on a couple of carved signs just to try out some different stuff and trying to do a lot of it by hand just because I love that feeling of how you're moving material. Signs are made out of white pine, so it's not like I'm really exerting myself a lot. But getting a level bottom or a consistent depth as you're dropping down those surfaces, I've really appreciated how much a router plane can do. And then all of a sudden, you start using a tool in one capacity, and then you're working on something else, and all of a sudden little light bulbs are going off. Like, this would be a great application for a router plane. And so, yeah.
What kind of router plane do you have?
I have a 385-year-old Stanley something or other that's, I think, was from like the World War I era.
Okay.
The one I got had the open throat, where it's got the big rainbow arch at the front, but I made a little Wenge base plate that I can screw on. So it's a solid piece with just a little cutout for where the blade is. So I can use it on edges a lot easier than those open throat models typically are. And then I've the Veritas router plane blades fit the Stanleys.
I was gonna ask you if you did that. Okay.
So I had the stock one that came with it is just a 1/2 inch weirdo looking blade, but then I have a 1/2 inch spear point, a 1/4 inch, and an 1/8 inch blade to go with it. And was just using the spear point recently, and that's been really nice for when you really can't find the grain direction that you need to go, or if you're working in such a tight area that you just can't go with the grain direction. So when you have to go kind of across the grain, that spear point blade is really helpful.
Cool.
I recently got a 6mm blade from Veritas for I have like it's the chrome one, so I think it's British Stanley.
Okay.
But the 6mm blade I got because I found myself very oftentimes needing to excavate something in a 1/4 inch groove. And the 1/4 inch blade's not getting in the 1/4 inch groove without lack of tolerance, without lack of slop. And so I was really pleasantly surprised to see that Veritas has like the whole line of metric sizes too. But the Veritas, one reason why I was going to ask if you use the Veritas blades is because they unscrew from the stem, right, for sharpening purposes?
The spear point does. The smaller ones are just single piece constructions.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. But that would make the spear point a lot easier to sharpen.
Right.
Yeah. Cool. Mike, you want to go next?
Yeah. So my favorite thing is helping somebody get sharp and then watching them use a sharp tool for the first time.
This is full Pekovich.
I was teaching this last weekend. It was kind of a second weekend of a table making class. And there was, a couple, in woodworking years, younger guys there, but who were super passionate, super committed, had made some investment in some good tools. And, but still, they just weren't sharp enough for them. They're still kind of saying, okay, why do I have this thing? It doesn't work very well. And to take someone at that point in their woodworking journey, get them up and running, get it sharp, and then, seeing that light bulb go on, it's like, okay, this is cool. Yeah, I mean, for me personally, that experience was when David Welter, formerly of College of the Redwoods, which is currently known as the Krenov School, handed me a sharp hand plane for the very first time. And it was just like, oh, this is a great plane. He said, no, this is sharp. It's like, oh, okay. And that was it. That was just informed my career, over the next 25 years.
That was you for me. Yeah. That was like day 2 on the job. And you're like, hey, let's go down to the shop and sharpen. And it was, excellent. I thought I knew sharp, and I thought that hand tools were overrated. And then you handed me that number 4, that bronze number 4 that we have down at the shop. And after we had sharpened it up, it was like, this is exactly what everyone talks about. So,
yeah, I don't know if I don't know if I said that out loud to you or just thought it, Ben, but it was like, let me show you how to sharpen before anybody else around here shows you how to sharpen.
I'm going to get to him first.
Sorry, Phil.
No, I was going to say I was teaching a class this past weekend myself, and it was a stool that we were making and refining the bottom of some notched dado kind of joints. And one of the students was going at it with his chisels and was just feeling frustrated. And I just went over and I said, here, just try these, see how that works. And it was the set that I had, you sharpen them up just before class just to get things started. And he's like, man, where did you get these? And it's the same thing. It's sharp. He goes, yeah, but I just bought my chisels. So, yes, and being able to, talk about what that means versus, because you can cut yourself with a recently purchased chisel, but there is a definite qualitative difference in the sharpening.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that is like the biggest hurdle, is that even an expensive brand new hand tool, it ain't sharp enough to do what it's supposed to do. And that's a whole nother, learning curve beyond, even just using the tools to get sharp. Do you have sort of a go-to if you're talking to a student in terms of, okay, here's a down and dirty way to get as sharp as you need?
I guess when I'm doing it, I usually have my own sharpening gear there. So I'm talking about it in terms of that stuff.
Sure.
But I try to be as agnostic on that as possible, where it's just a matter of, you're looking at a flat reference back surface, whether that's a chisel or a hand plane or whatever, pocket knife, even depending on what we're working with, and then addressing a bevel. And then I'm usually, in the course of a class, when I'm trying to do a project, we'll put a micro bevel on it just to be able to get there quick, so that we're not reshaping bevel angles and stuff like that. So, so whatever it is, we're going to go up a couple of degrees just to make this a simple process.
Right.
Usually showing with a honing guide, just because I think there's a little bit more confidence on the part that somebody is there to learn about the project.
Yes.
But I want to get them to a place where they're really excited about a sharp tool.
Right.
Do either of you find that you have to almost build that time into the flow of a class?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I don't know how Mike approaches his classes for projects, but this stool class was 3 different Saturdays spread out over the last month or so. And it was like the end of the second class where I said, I know we're trying to build a stool here, but that was all a ruse. I'm trying to teach you techniques, and I'm using the stool as the lure. That's the bait to bring you in. And it's more about when you're done with this, you're like, oh, well, when I build this, I know I can do it this way because I did it on that stool, rather than, I want you to have a really cool, it was an adjustable height stool with wood threads in it, so it's kind of, there's that fun element there.
There's a lot there. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. But, it's more about figuring out how to create smooth shapes and curves. And, we did hand cut joinery on where the legs and the horizontal pieces go together. And that's where the chisels came in. And so, yeah.
Yeah. For classes, rarely is there time to do any sort of sharpening demos. And if someone comes in with a really beat up chisel or hand plane, it's like, nope, we don't have time to address it in this class.
Right.
Let's, here's a tool. Let's go find a sharp tool. If it means getting sharp, that's usually like a one-on-one thing. Like, oh, come over here really quick to my sharpening station. Let's get you sharp. It's not really like a whole class thing. The scraper sharpening demo, that's, if I'm demonstrating how to sharpen a scraper to the entire class, it means we're in really good shape. Our time is good. That's such a fundamental skill that nobody knows how to sharpen a scraper, and there's a billion ways to do it. But again, if I can send someone home with the confidence and the understanding on how to hone a scraper and put that to use, I think that's a huge thing. But unfortunately, even like in a 6-day project class, you're going, and to sit down and talk about some of the finer points of the craft. I do a 2-day hand tool boot camp kind of a thing where I'm able to address tool by tool, sharpening every tool and then putting it to use. And that's about the only sort of format that I have where I have that bandwidth to do that.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to go with my all-time favorite tool or technique, and I am going to somewhat Pekovich this and say my current obsession or whatever is working at the right height.
Oh.
And trying to figure out the easiest way of going about that. And I think everybody's got benches wrong. I think everybody makes workbenches way too low, and I don't know what all is going on. But I don't, surface my projects with hand planes. I don't. So like setting a workbench height for the use of a specific tool has proven to me to be not the best use of my my time or whatever. And so I have started. So StewMac, full disclosure, StewMac. I did a project for StewMac, the luthier supply company. And as part of the thanks for that, they sent me a bunch of stuff. And so like, if you see me around town, I'm wearing a StewMac jacket now because it's super cool. But one of the things that they sent me was this work surface for holding guitars, and it spins around. You can adjust the height, and I fell in love with it for getting things right up in my face where I need to see them, because my eyesight is not getting better, and the closer I can get to something, the better I am, the less my back is sore and all of that. So I've started now taking that idea, and I'm trying to point to it, and I don't know how, but behind me on the bench, I have a mount that I CNC'd out, and it has 2 slots for receiving 2-inch pipe that I can then mount things to and alter the height. So right now I've got a platform that can get right up to my literal eye level if I wanted to. I kind of went overkill with it. But so if I'm doing marquetry work, if I'm doing anything inlay or whatever, I can get that work wherever I want in a comfortable manner. And it's my own take on the Steve Latta bench on bench, or Jeff Miller had one, and I'm sure now I got to learn the whole catalog of projects from Woodsmith shop, and so that I can throw those out there too. I'm sure that y'all have many takes on it as well, but just the idea of stop bending over your bench and hurting your back. And for me, I'm trying to find ways of taking what I had, the bench that I have, and making it work better for me. And that's the 2-inch pipe to make an adjustable height work surface is my new favorite thing of all time.
Very cool.
I like it. You guys had I don't remember if he was a doctor, did at least one article or 2 articles about ergonomics, for lack of a better word, of how to stand at a drill press, where you had your foot up, 1 foot up on a step, just so you don't have that like, kind of kinked hip kind of feel when you're there. And then he had talked about where there was like different zones for height, where you had like a finesse zone that was in your kind of the midsection of your chest or whatever. And then a strength zone where it's lower down and stuff like that. And that was always instructive for me. And, not every shop has the size to be able to have multiple height work surfaces, but if you're mindful of that, then some of the things that you can do, maybe it means that you don't have multiple height work surfaces. Maybe it means sometimes you're sitting down to do something instead of standing up, or I have a vise that I more or less lives on one end of my bench that's taller, and it's perfect for when I'm doing some detail stuff. Because exactly right. You just hunching over on stuff, it's tough to see it in the first place and feel like you're getting decent access with whatever tool you're working with on it. So yeah, I love it.
Cool. That was cool. Yeah, that was by a physical therapist up in New Hampshire did that for us. I went up on that shoot, which was super cool. Stayed at the Robert Frost Motor Inn, which was horrible. Other than that, it was great. And also had really bad Chinese food at 9:00 at night.
Sounds like awesome, dude.
Yeah,
great trip.
Good. Other than that, it was wonderful. Cool. And then Christian Bexford did an article for us on working at the right height, where he has his bench. He has like a pull-out little low box that he stands on for doing his heavy duty hand planing. He works at the right height. He has sort of the Mox on Vice style bench on bench for getting up higher for dovetails. And he has an even taller piece with a tilted top for carving. But that whole thing that's the thing is, well, how high should I make my workbench? And it's like, well,
just kind of make it.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of things you're going to be doing that will not be ideally suited for any height that you actually make your bench. So,
yeah. I mean, it even plays with tools too, where, like working at a miter saw, if you're spending time at a miter saw, that tool is better when it's up in the 42-inch range where you're approaching that standing up, where you can kind of see where your lines are, where you're going to be moving pieces to and from, whereas a table saw I actually like a little bit lower, where it feels like you can get a better view, because there's times when you're doing box joints when you kind of want to be over the top and see it, and if the table saw is too high you can't get there. So
Tom McLaughlin has one of those little platforms that he pulls out for when he's doing dovetails on the table saw, just for that very reason, so he can
to get up over there,
kind of crane over it a little bit. Yeah The tool that I always think I'm in the minority on is I have my drill press really high.
I do as well.
You do too? Okay.
Yeah.
Benchtop drill press, and it's on top of a tall bench, if you will. And the work is at about eye level.
Yeah.
And I thought that was normal. And then I started working in other places, and, freestanding drill presses are all like way down there. Why are you doing that? And it never made sense to me until I used one of those safety planes. It's the drill press mounted planer.
Thickness planer,
thing. Yeah. And then all of a sudden I went to use it. I was like, no, this is not cool. This is not right. It's right next to my face. Why would I do this? No. And I was like, I wish I had a lower drill press now. I think I might have even taken my drill press and put it on a lower bench just for that task, because I didn't like it.
Yeah.
All right. So, do you have more?
Oh, I was just going to say, for a bigger bandsaws, I don't know if they're just naturally lower, but they tend to be almost waist level, big 18-inch bandsaw. But I've used 14-inch bandsaws where they're up almost mid-chest level, and it's so much nicer to be working on smaller stuff at the smaller bandsaw with a higher height. So it seems like they almost have to look more. It's like I've used small bandsaws with a high table and big bandsaws lower, and I don't know if they've anticipated that use in their engineering of the piece or not, but it is something I would pay attention to if I were looking for a new bandsaw.
Yeah, totally. All right, so one more question. Do we want to do scratch-free cast iron tables or dovetail layout? Phil, you get to pick.
Oh my goodness. Let's do cast iron tables for 500.
I like it. Normally I cut out the part where we discuss which question we're going to answer, but that just made it in. This question is from Thomas.
This question is so loaded. There's so many things in here. Yes.
Yeah.
Like everyone, I want to keep my cast iron tables clean, shiny, and scratch free. I use the product that won your best rust prevention test, which is the CR. I forget which one. I'll post it. I'll post the test. So I'm not too worried about rust, but I am worried about scratches after watching someone haphazardly unload a handful of vice grips and wrenches onto my bandsaw table.
That's the part that was like, what?
Yeah.
There's something going on here.
Yeah.
No, I might have over dramatized it. I might have oversold that, but that's the way I read it, is that you need to keep the wrenches off of Thomas's stuff.
Yeah, it might not be your tabletop treatment. It could be who you're letting in your shop.
I thought, no, that won't do. Now I'm like in my kid's storybook telling voices. What do you think about saturating a towel with oil and placing it on my saw tables when they aren't in use? Could I inadvertently trap moisture instead of repel it? So, Phil?
I have two thoughts there. One of them is a quote from probably one of the greatest thinkers of our time.
Oh, this is good.
She's Queen Elsa of Arendelle, who said, "Let it go." And that if you're really worried about scratches on a cast iron surface, then it's time to maybe invest in another set of tools, perhaps. And I get taking care of your tools, and that's a really important part. So not to disregard it, and mostly to be funny. But I mean, cast iron is the way cast iron is because it's going to keep its overall flatness for a really long time. But in the course of it, it's going to live a life. And you're just as likely to scratch the cast iron table saw surface if you run plywood on edge over the top of it, you know. So I think in that sense, yeah, you got to watch out what you're pouring out onto your bench top, but then also realize that it's like your workbench. It's going to get dinged up. Just hit it with a hammer and move on. The other thing is the idea of an auxiliary work surface. Because I mean, like, raise your hand if you use your table saw for more than cutting wood, you know, like that's every woodworker. Or the right side of your table saw past the rip fence is auxiliary surface number 1, you know, for all kinds of at the ready storage. So yeah, get yourself some really nice hardboard, you know, splurge on that hardboard because it's going to be durable, but it's also going to be like oil baked or whatever they call it, service tempered, you know. And then unless your shop is going through really drastic high speed changes in temperature or humidity, you're not going to trap moisture on it. I don't believe. My shop is an uninsulated garage, and I don't have issues with rust in there unless it's been over years and years. But, you know, in Iowa here, we have it's gross in summer and super dry in winter. And
you have the swings.
Yeah. And I'm sure you guys do, being kind of on the coast a little bit, you know, but it's, you know, summertime here is pretty juicy. And at night you can get it can cool off so that you get dew falling and whatever. And, but I don't really have that inside. I think you would only get that if it's really these shocks up and down.
Yeah.
I think my worry about covering it is out of sight, out of mind. If I covered a surface that I did not use frequently, I think you could wind up with, now I don't have rust problems here, but I'm also like weird about humidity in my shop. And I still have, sometimes I picked up my tack hammer the other day, my old vintage tack hammer. It was just rusted on one side. I just have no idea why. My shop is generally between 45 and 50% humidity or whatever. It is controlled, but I think that I would be weary of covering it up and not being able to keep an eye on it. And you know, if you want to keep something rust free or whatever, and Thomas is not worried about rust, but if you want to keep something rust free, it's the best way of doing that is to consistently use it, you know? So
yeah. But if he's using the rust treatment on that on a regular basis, I don't, you know, I think there's, you know, another feature of cast iron is that it's slightly porous, you know, that it will absorb
the stuff,
wax or a light coat of machine oil or something like that. That's going to be a benefit in there. You know, I was working on my drill press and I have an auxiliary table, plywood auxiliary table. And it's been on my drill press for almost 15 years now. And I pulled that off to do the work on it. And the table didn't have any rust underneath that. So
that is a great point, because everybody leaves a wood table on their drill press forever. And you're right. Well, all right. I stand corrected.
Yeah. So I got a formerly unheated shop in Connecticut, and rust was an issue. And it was exactly what you were pointing to, Phil, which is it had to do with the temperature variation within the shop. And the worst time would be like a February where you had this odd day where it would spike from 18 degrees at night to a 60 degrees during the day. And the entire shop was just sort of like a, I don't know, like a glass with ice water in it, just completely wet on all the surfaces. And so now it's, in terms of rust prevention, I think if you can condition your shop, or you can, for instance, if you have a tool chest or tool cabinet, if you can sort of moderate the contact with air, that's going to help out a lot. And I used to have to keep a 1/4-inch plywood on top of all of my joiner, my table saw, my bandsaw, for that exact reason. But I found that just keeping it covered, it wouldn't rust underneath it, because you're just protecting it from the moisture. And now that I've got it's insulated and I have a heater in there and an air conditioner, it's not a problem at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to look. I think Raleigh recommends, now that I think about it, he recommended covering things, but I think he would put like carpet on the bottom of the board or whatever that he was putting on there, so that there is like full contact.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
sorry to interrupt.
The other thing, so you have the rust protection if it's some sort of thing you're applying, but it also has to do with the friction on the tabletop. I think it's nice. I have some stuff. It's in that, I don't know what brand it is, Top Coat or something. It's in that
Glide Coat.
Orange Glide Coat.
Yeah.
You spray it on, you kind of wipe it off. Bob Van Dyke uses crumpled up wax paper. He keeps around and just rubs that on a joiner table and fence or on the table saw, and that works out really well as well.
Yeah.
I think just doing something like that, especially if I'm working a lot with pine and it gets kind of pitchy, and it can be pretty tough to start pushing or to push that across the table saw for lots of rips. And I find that just light coat of wax or spraying it with something, to me, obviously, because rust isn't an issue, but I do think that kind of the surface friction, putting something on there to make life a little bit easier, is a really important thing to do.
Yeah. It's almost that it doesn't really matter, in air quotes, what the thing is if you have a routine for it.
Yeah.
That if it's just part of your workshop practice, that that, like you said, I've been doing some stuff in white pine too, and the planer beds and joiner beds, just to get that kind of gummy. But if you know that going into it, then you hit it with a quick spritz of, I use Bow Shield a lot.
Yeah, right.
So same kind of deal as Top Coat or Glide Coat or whatever. And it just, it makes life easier on so many levels. And it's just part of your, you sweep up at the end of the day and you maybe hit your various tool beds with whatever it needs. Cast iron is really nice. If you are interested in taking out some of the scratches or minimizing the look of it, cast iron sands really well. You get some silicon carbide discs on a random orbit sander, and you can polish up a table saw and make it look nice.
Cool. Yeah, and just don't be dumping vice grips onto your bandsaw table.
Right. Yeah.
Thomas, you need new friends, my friend.
Well, that about does it for this episode of Shop Talk Live. Thank you to new family member, whatever, Phil Huber, for joining us on the show today. It's going to be a blast having him around and helping us out. If you'd like more information about the Tom McLaughlin e-learning course on veneering, head on over to finewoodworking.com/veneering course, one word, veneering course. The course opens January 17th. There's 3 live Q&A sessions with Tom. He takes you through 3 projects and lots of different methods. And it's a really, really fantastic course. I think you're going to learn a lot from it. So head on over to finewoodworking.com/veneering course and get your veneer on. All right. Send those emails to shoptalk@taunton.com for now. I think that email address is going to go away eventually, but keep sending them there. And if you're watching on YouTube, please click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in not 2 weeks with another episode. We're taking the next episode off for the holidays, but we'll be back after that and all new Shop Talk Lives for you. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
This is embarrassing.